That's ours.
Yeah, I'm trying, business governance model.
It's good seeing you again.
So our top 10 turned into a top 8. We figured that was probably enough work. And in our top 10, you'll find all of the opportunities, needs, and threats, everything that we were discussing built into it. The first is the actual business model, how it's going to be structured. We discussed both nonprofit and L3Cs, the social aspect of it, but we also discussed how a for-profit could be more beneficial, especially in the startup of the organization. The second thing we ran into was how are vendors going to be vetted? How is this going to be kept from turning into an organization that's full of people selling Avon makeup or multi-level marketing? How do we keep it beneficial to the core community and producers that are here in Colorado Springs and the surrounding areas? So that brought us into boards. You got to have an elected board of some sort. And we figured no matter whether you go for-profit, non-profit, L3C, there's got to be a board to make some of these vetting decisions, because it's not always going to be very simple, cut and dry. There might be some gray area. So some people there to debate on it and make the decisions. And that brought us to how is the board going to be elected, and how are they going to get together and come together, who's going to be put on it. And that came from the revenue sharing. We decided some part of this model needs to have a co-op aspect to it, so that everyone in the community can buy into it. I don't know if anyone here is a member of REI. REI is one giant co-op, and you get some really good benefits by being a member, and it's not expensive. But we want to make it a model that if someone wants to put money into it, they can put a small sum into it, and then they're vested. So the infrastructure will be there before they do it. It'll be set up. But once they put money into it, then they're a little bit vested to show up more often. And it shows that you're getting the right people there if they're willing to put their own money into it. So that's the co-op model. Logistics-wise, we discussed the soil model, which, Dave, what was that abbreviated down to?
Sustaining our interdependent livelihoods.
Okay. And basically, this entire model
Thank you,
is
Dave.
based off of
Thanks, Mike.
Mike's trucks. And the idea is to keep producers producing. So there's farmers along the Front Range and around the area that are farming, and they're doing great work. So how do we get their produce there and sell it without them having to quit farming? Because if they're not farming, they're not producing, and the whole model falls apart. So soil is one aspect of it where they don't actually have to be at the place of business. They can keep farming. With trucks, all the produce would come in and be sold there, and then the profits would be shared. But we also discussed coming down to hybrid, that there also needs to be a model so that independent merchants like craftsmen who are taking agricultural goods and turning them into final products are able to sell those. And that would be independent businesses, and they'd be separate entities, but selling under the same roof. Was the idea. But to control all that, you need staffing and admin and overhead. That's something that's going to have to be controlled by the board. So that's our top 8. The next step for all of this, and to get to this of what the business model looks like, that's going to be completely dictated off of where's the money coming from. There's various ways to get the funding, but that'll change your entire business model and where you're taking it from. So that's our side of things.
Any
Money
questions
people
or comments on that?
Were there any business models that you were in favor of? Because you had mentioned a couple, but was there any that
I'm
stood out?
really in favor of the L3C, because there's some tax benefits that we went over for investors, and yet they're still investors. They can still have profit sharing in it. The only issue we talked about is right now in Colorado, the Secretary of State does not actually have a way for you to register an L3C. So that's a little bit of an issue. If we did go with that way, it'd have to be registered in another state doing the business here. And that's kind of funky, so.
I just came across, there's a group of folks up in Boulder that have been in business for a while who are doing the whole L3C thing for L3C,
L3C.
yeah. I can never say it, and I see that you guys do the same thing I always do.
Yeah, we debated for a few.
But anyway, I just came across them the other day, and so I feel like there's there's more happening there in our state than maybe there was before. But-
Yeah, I know it's a pretty new concept. I think it's fantastic. It's ideally tailored for something like this.
So explain what it is again.
So it's basically a model meant for social enterprises. So instead of being an LLC for profit, it's a social enterprise, and it's built so that investors can invest money. Do you want to explain it? 'Cause you know a lot more about it. This is the
Just keep
picture
us
she
on
drew me.
There's diagram.
Yeah.
Okay, with an L3C, so it's basically, as he was saying, a social enterprise, so you can have some profit. You just can't have a lot of profit, and it has to be for social good. But one of the things that it does have, which you can't have with a nonprofit, which is really great, is that you can have investors. So here you have investor ABC, they put their money, they invest into the business, or in this case would be the public market. Then there's an entity, which I'm sorry, I forgot the name of this, but let's just call it a foundation for right now. There's a foundation down here that all the profits funnel into this group here. And then from this, they can go into whatever their preferred investment portfolio would be. So I just put like an IRA. So then it goes, the IRA goes right back up into the investor. So it's basically making this wonderful circle. They get tax incentives, breaks and things like that, but they're able to invest funds in, but they're also being able to make a profit. So it's a great model. So that's one of the things you can do with the L3C you can't do with the nonprofit.
I think since it's such a new concept, we might be being too vague on it, but essentially what I'm getting is that it doesn't rule out any particular form of raising funds.
Right.
And so that has obviously huge opportunity for a social enterprise like this. All right, thank you guys.
Excellent.
Okay, the next group.
I think I should go next.
Okay.
That's all right, because
Yeah.
our group ties into your.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right?
So this is the finance, grants, and partnerships.
And I even felt like we should probably even be together, but
Yeah.
I'm glad we weren't. So,
Thank you very much.
no, because it was actually really good, because I think
You want me to hold that so you can
by us
talk?
being, sure, by us being in our own group, I think we really did kind of branch out and think beyond just what does the model look like? Is it a nonprofit? Is it the blah, 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 L3C, LC3, whatever? But we really definitely did land on the fact that it needs to be either the nonprofit or the blah.
That one,
Yeah.
social enterprise.
Because, number one, the other models that we have, they're all nonprofits already anyway, which is telling in and of itself. As I think about this, I've been trying to figure out how it could be an actual business versus just a nonprofit, and it is kind of hard because there's really this piece right here, the startup versus the maintaining. And, you know, when you think about it from that perspective, with the startup, everything we do as a startup, we want to have all of this seed money that comes in that's going to help us get started. But then on the other end, we want to be, you know, maintained kind of with just a traditional business model and make it work. And so can you do both? Probably not. So it seems like from the beginning get-go, it needs to be some type of a, you know, nonprofit or L3C that's going to take it forward and keep it going. And it was very interesting to see that all 6 of the comparison markets really were nonprofits from the beginning all the way through, which surprised me. So anyway, you know, recognizing that, you know, at the beginning, things might look a little bit different from the end, but we definitely have to keep the end in mind. Where is all the money going to come from and how are we going to keep it going once it's happening? And that's why it's good that the other group was meeting over here talking about, you know, vendors, partnerships, what does that look like? So we know that we have kind of a maintained model at the end, really going to be important, to then kind of lead to the startup piece. And basically, we have many, many, many pages of startup funding. There's just all kinds of organizations, foundations, city, county, local, all kinds of groups out there that with the right put together plan, there's going to be money out there for these things to make them happen. Social enterprise is a really important piece. Kind of taking Vicki's idea just a little bit further from that is actually recognizing that within this market, you have small enterprises of, you know, people working and doing things that other nonprofits are helping to get them going. So Aspen Point, which it's ironic that we're meeting here today, I don't know how many of you guys are real familiar with kind of Aspen Point and their model of supporting people with mental health needs, you know, to give them job training and pay them to be doing those things. They started out, you know, with a really small model of a cleaning program, and they've just grown, and now their cafe is one of their biggest, you know, social enterprises, and they've got other ones that are, you know, that they're working on. And so thinking about having, you know, partnering with other nonprofits that bring social enterprise into that space. So, you know, on the maintaining side, there's other partnerships that come into play.
I just want to interject this too, because it's not even just nonprofits. Starbucks sells the coffee to them for cost. And so because they are training the youth work there that are like in the juvenile programs or whatever, but they're training their baristas. So then when these kids get out, they can go to work at any Starbucks. So it's, even the business side is coming in and saying, this is a great model and we want to, you know, work with it too.
Right.
So it's both sides.
And so we also really felt that it was really important to have support from our very own city and county. That was like a really, like, let's start by that. There's funding there, very limited, but growing. There's more funding in these categories, and there's just, you know, infinite funding kind of in that nonprofit fund, you know, foundation and other organizations, but just really making a concerted effort. What does it mean to get our city and county behind something like this, and really having people that take it seriously to talk to those folks and get them to value what's going on is really important for us. Money probably could follow. Darlene with Catamount Institute said, you know, what about, you know, a tax? You know, anyway, so
She doesn't love Joe.
So we'll just, you know, I mean, that aside, just really important, you know, stuff to think about. And then thinking about on the maintaining side, this kind of idea of anchors. We all know Ranch Foods Direct and Mike, you know, a huge piece to the anchor, but also thinking about schools. You know, could UCCS have some type of anchor presence at that space? Could another nonprofit, you know, whether it's Aspen Point or, you know, whoever, could they have an anchor presence in this space doing something? The Justice and Peace Commission, you know, Karen Chair. So this is Karen Chair's interest right there. But anyway, and then having, you know, private, which is kind of that whole vendor side coming in. So yeah, just a lot of possibilities here. And so I am glad that we weren't tied up with this group, even though we really are together.
And do you see them working together pretty well? This form
Definitely, yeah. Because just to know that, you know, that group kind of came to the same real conclusion of it being some type of a kind of nonprofit or L3C, you know, entity is encouraging. Just, you know, just right there, that to have people thinking about it versus imagining it being just a, you know, a business model that might be a co-op per se, but not a full-on nonprofit or an L3C. So it is good. Yeah.
This is not my expertise, which will probably come out in a second, but if I'm a socially conscious entrepreneur, so I have 200 hives of bees in the Black Forest, and I want to do honey, and I want to do the right kind of honey, and I want to sell it. Do I have to join a co-op and share my profits? Do I have the ability to essentially become a member of this thing, but then essentially sell my honey, and if I make $1 a jar, that's great. I mean, how
That's kind of
socialized essentially is this model at the entrepreneur level?
I think it could go either way. So I think kind of depending on, you know, that nonprofit model and board, you know, you are just another vendor that kind of comes in and is a part of that, but you
Meet
don't
certain
necessarily have to be
requirements
a co-op member. So,
Like at the Milwaukee market, when they started out, I think they were charging a small percentage to all the people that were in the space, so they could help promote, market, and build the business. And when I talked to them, The last time I talked to them, they were thinking about getting rid of that because they really didn't need it anymore because they had the business, they had the marketing already in place and didn't feel like it was necessary. But they were not charging the vendors for a percentage of their sales, just to support sort of a co-op. And the way I would see something like this is you go in, you rent your space if you're a bigger vendor that needs to be under a roof, but heck, otherwise, set up outside, like at a farmer's market or under the canopy or whatever, and you're welcome to come
But
and sell.
your rent is then a fee that goes to the nonprofit, which is the governing entity, but it allows, I'm just talking here, but
Yeah.
it allows essentially the entrepreneurial model of, I've got a good and I have to sell it and I have to meet certain standards and I have to vet my, stuff.
Yeah, the products would be vetted, but one of the things too is the, kind of like you were saying, and then Aaron, I think had said too, like at the Denver market, they only charge 10% of the profits for certain groups. So say you have someone come in that, like Mike, he's already established, he already has his business model, people know him, he says, you know what, I don't want to do that, I just want to pay you so much rent a month, fine. Maybe we have a hybrid with that too. We're seeing a lot of that word, I think, in all of these. But to someone else that might want to come in and say, I do want a booth, but I'm starting out, maybe you can do a percentage and you're like in an incubator for a certain amount of time. And after that percent of time, then, you need to fly the coop. You need to get out of the nest and you need to be able to stand on your own. But during that time, we want these small businesses to be able to grow. And if we have them say, okay, now you've got to pay this much money in rent and this, all their profits, next thing you know, they're shutting down and that doesn't help anybody. So there may be different scales or methodologies that we use. It may be someone that just says, I'm just going to come outside and just set up a booth and that's all I'm going to do and I'm going to sell my stuff and that's fine. But inside, there'll definitely be a lot more vetting because we have to make sure that we're not just, like I think Aaron was saying something about somebody taking honey and taking the label off and putting their own label on. We don't want that from the store.
Just a quick comment. I'm reading Michael Schumann's book, Local Dollars, Local Cents. I don't know if you guys have heard of this book, but it's basically about how to move money from Wall Street to local communities. What kind of legal vehicles there are, and whatever we come up with, I think it would be really important to have a model that allows for local investment. Because I'm thinking, for instance, CC. CC has a multi-million-dollar endowment. And right now, all the students, of course, every year, the students are saying this investment should be ethical. This investment should be socially responsible. And so I'm thinking, if we can find a model that allows for it, maybe CC would be willing to take $100,000 out of their endowment and put it into a local investment vehicle.
I think
As long as the return on investment were the same, I'm predicting CC wouldn't care. If they say, well, the $100,000 is making this on Wall Street, we can put it into this vehicle and make the same ROI. We'll try it. So I think that's what we have to find, is the right vehicle for local people to invest.
Anybody have any more questions or comments for Melissa?
And my two folks, anything else you guys want to add?
Okay, so tenant person? Tenants?
You guys can't read this, but we kind of went from an approach of trying to list the people that would draw buyers, customers, money into the space, and also what we would like to offer there, etc. And we broke down tenants would be more permanent and regular, whereas vendors might be transient, seasonal sort of things. For example, a family that has a crop that they want to harvest and share at a market or whatever, that would be a vendor, so we'd have to have a space, spaces that are rentable for things like that. But we have, under the food category, Ranch Foods, Arkansas Valley Organic Growers, CFAN, families, CSAs, the Goat Cheese Lady, Joyful Noise, I'm not sure exactly what they do.
They're a Joel Salatin-esque farm up in Black Forest.
Okay, so a local farm. Reseller, suppose there's a store, Mountain Mama small, mini Mountain Mama, or something like that. Grocers, I think that, personally, I believe that what
makes people come is knowing that they can get a lot of what they want in one place. That's why people go to Walmart, not necessarily because of the price. They know they can get pretty much everything they want when they go to Walmart. So having a diversity of products is important, but obviously we want to make it as local as possible. But in the beginning, we might have to make it a little, might open up the gates a bit more to create the business clientele and traffic and stuff like that. So grocers, Sinton Dairy, processors. Mike Callicrate has a processing facility, and he, Goat Cheese Lady. There's also an outfit called Gotta Love It, which is a commercial kitchen in which small operators rent the kitchen, etc. So you can have one kitchen, one health department check off, and cost to build it, so that you have lots of people that would use it, etc. Personal shopper. We have all of these amenities. Having a personal shopper that can go around to get your wool socks or your alpaca socks or whatever, and get your goat cheese and get your milk and stuff like that, and then have a drive up for the local business people to just drive in as they go home, because capturing the people from the Stetson Hills, Glen Eagle, Briargate, stuff like that. These are the people that don't normally frequent downtown, and they kind of question the need for downtown and stuff like that. So if we can make it easy to go from the office to the store to home, that's another clientele that we want to bring in. On-site fruit and vegetable production, some sort of demonstration garden or rentable garden or something like that, but we want to be able to teach people throughout this the whole thing. There's a local manufacturer making whiskey, 719 Whiskey. So we might have that sort of facility, a brewing co-op where you can have a bigger than your home brew sort of a setup. We also considered in the business model having memberships where you have a membership to the market and you get a discount for that, etc. Some office space would be handy. I know in the Chrissy Fowler building, there's a second-story band of building or offices up there, so those are, in that facility, those are rentable. Other places that we, other vendors and the like, obviously everyone on the Peak to Plains Alliance list is a contender. But also a lot of produce and goods go to Denver, and then they get distributed and et cetera, but we would probably like to capture a little bit of that market and have that distribution center down here a little bit more. We also thought about some dry goods. Obviously, we get a lot of products from farm. Hemp is the new thing, 10 inches of rain to grow a good hemp plant. I learned that last night. Books, artisans, crafts, bike shop. Obviously, this market is kind of a natural for a bike shop sort of a thing. Personal care, like hair and massage and stuff like that. Entertainment and culture to make it more of a off hours sort of a place. Musicians, coffee shop, art gallery, ice rink, community like a dog park, an amphitheater. Education, classes, lectures, cannery, learn how to do that sort of stuff. That might be in a commercial kitchen sort of a thing. Restaurants, suppose we had Adams Mountain Cafe. We wanted to do a little cafe, a remote site or something like that. So get someone who's already got a business going and have a little place. We certainly want to be kid-friendly, maybe even to the point of having daycare down there. Even a mini zoo, etc. Health, yoga, nutritionist, things like that, and a mini trolley. Now, some of the opportunities and obstacles involved value. For example, an ice rink is a very costly proposition to build, takes up a lot of real estate, and you don't get a lot of income from it. So this all has to be rolled into the business model. A dog park is good, but you got America the Beautiful Park over there. But you need, while mom and dad are shopping or whatever, you need some place for the kid and the dogs to go and stuff like that. So there's going to be some need for that sort of a thing. So that all rolls into it. Our list of important things, local, that was number 1 on our top 10 list. Food, number 2. 3 is local dry goods. 4 is entertainment and culture. 5 was health and well-being. 6 was office space. 7 was education. And 8 was the most miscellaneous things. Questions?
I'm really glad to see childcare on there. One of the social enterprises that I thought about with this had to do with childcare. And so it's not just necessarily, a person who can put together a childcare business that would open up down there, but it could be a social enterprise that's being supported in order to train other, folks to work with kids and how to then move on and start your own businesses elsewhere. So I'm glad to see that came up there. I think that's great. And I also, some people are going to laugh at me, but I also kind of like the idea, bikes are great, the bike shop, but I'm kind of intrigued by folks in the community who are starting to work on vintage motorcycles or vintage cars. And I know that this particular space that's been looked at is really, really big. And so is there a possibility of creating 2 spaces where, a person, or it could, again, be a social enterprise where people are learning together how to work on, vintage motorcycles, they're a little smaller than vintage cars, but, having a space where there's some really unique aspect to what they're doing instead of just a typical auto shop or whatever.
I think that kind of rolls back into the use versus income aspect of it. And some are going to be low income but highly valued, and some of them are going to be the opposite of that. Yes, Julie?
For the cannery or whatever you called it, and the commercial kitchen, a lot of cities have very successfully combined their extension service and gardens or markets. Chicago and St. Louis both do that. And our extension service has been kind of dying over the last couple of years compared to the ones in Pueblo or Teller County, where they have food preservation and whatnot classes all the time. But the possibility to buy kale at the market and then learn how to cook it or learn what to do with it, extension, I think extension would be a good permanent tenant, would pay rent, the government agency, and already offers things like commercial kitchens and all of these classes.
And that would also include production, agricultural production as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So you've got your growing it, and then you've got your preparation,
So we got
preserving it.
processing and on-site.
And I would write extension down there as a potential. I'd write extension down there.
We had extension down as one of our partners, and somewhere on those notes is a short list of partners. Because we did talk about that. Extension needs a shot in the arm.
And we have that down as funder too.
I just want to mention, I mentioned this to Jerry Downing. They did, they opened Gotta Love It up on Uinta in September 1st, and they immediately had like 15 producer clients going in there. And I said, if you feel like you were needing to move again into a bigger place, would you consider the downtown market? And he said, in a heartbeat.
Cool.
Yes.
You might want to put plants down there too. I mean, even your farmer's market, there people sell plants, and the whole idea of
Yeah,
kind
we
of
had
people grow in their own
flowers and such too.
flowers, but I mean, it's the whole idea of it's not just canning it and buying it there, it may be growing some of your own.
Mike?
I'd break that grocer part down into like a deli, bakery, all those being separate spaces. You're going to want a wine shop probably. Sweets, what do you call that? Sweet
Pastries
shop.
or chocolate.
Pastries.
Yeah, Michelle's. Ice cream.
Oh, ice cream. Gotta have ice cream.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I guess this falls under the need maybe or the opportunity. So how will we get to these people? I mean, what is the way to reach out to them to say, what would you like to be involved? Would you like to be more of just a come out during the summer farmer, or would you like to be involved in the all year long into an actual space? I mean, how would we determine that?
Well, for example, if you have CFAM and CSAs and stuff like that, and they're to be year-round.
Right.
Let's just say you had a big square building, you'd have to want to probably put them on the perimeter such they have space outdoor seasonally, right? So a lot of what we would do with who these people are, I think has to do with the property that we get and also the bigger business model. But I was surprised we came up with this many sorts of businesses that we could fit in there. So reaching out to them, I think, is just a matter of effort, not necessarily difficulty.
Great.
It was one of the challenges is how to get buy-in.
Yeah, that's,
That is like our number one challenge, is figuring that out. Next meeting.
that's the obstacle.
Also, too, fitting into the business planning is you're going to have something on the marketing side to do surveys, solicitations, and things like that that go to the type of people that you want to attract once you define your concept of operations.
That's a good point.
Location.
Location.
Well, we started out with the premise that a lot of Colorado Springs, and not just downtown, needs redevelopment. And there are other areas, but we talked about Academy being one of them. But if you boil it down to its essence, we really think that downtown should be the spot. That because of transportation and the location, the synergy of what this can do for redevelopment, we thought that downtown would be our primary focus. Mike and Bobby have done a great job on the Chrissy Fowler site. That seems to be the number one. That's kind of how this whole thing started. We talked about the advantages of that. Again, the location, the proximity to parking garages, the proximity to the interstate, the new interchange that's going to be going in on Cimarron. You've got farmers coming up south from the valley. You've got people coming down Highway 24. It all just kind of happens right downtown. But we wanted to look outside of the Chrissy Fowler site. You know, what's a plan B? What's a plan C? And so we came up with, I think, some really good ideas that the city owns. Well, let me back up a little bit. When we talk about the Chrissy Fowler site, one of the disadvantages is that it is privately owned. And so you're dealing with a private individual. But if we looked at some other sites that perhaps if the city owns or the park department owns, then maybe we're not going to have that obstacle. So it was mentioned that Dorchester Park, which is in between Tejon and Nevada, just north of the interstate. There already is a great public garden down there. It's kind of a gateway in between downtown and Ivywild. It could address some of the South Nevada concerns. It's a park. Someone mentioned, I think Carl said it's 7.6 acres, so it's good size. There's also the Antlers Park. Am I going too fast here? Antlers Park, which is across from the train depot. Let's see, where are we?
Pull back just a little bit.
You're too close.
Right there.
Okay, so there's Antlers Park, which is a little smaller, like 2.6 acres, I think Carl said. Really close to downtown. I mean, it's right in the heart of it there. And again, public owned. So we had 2 public parks that are possible. And then John Olson came up with kind of a pet project of his, Pueblo Avenue, which Pueblo Avenue is between Weber and Wasatch. It's the diagonal street. There you go. There's Pueblo Avenue. Really underused. The Zodiac is over there, the old Gill Center, which is now, public television, I believe. Channel 8 just moved into it along with the library. It's across from Habitat for Humanity. So it's a good site. It's on that diagonal that ties into the Pioneers Museum, so it's a lot of walkability. So if you wanted to re-energize downtown and start new development of residential, Wasatch and Weber, great streets where that could happen. So those are basically our sites. Also, if Chris Jenkins, Norwood, they control most of that Chrissy Fowler area, okay? But right across the street from Chrissy Fowler, Mike Trapp of Olson Plumbing owns that block. Just north of the Chrissy Fowler site, directly across from the Pikes Peak Center and the parking garage.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's Olson, okay? So without throwing all our eggs into the Chrissy Fowler basket, there are other sites possible. You know, it's a question of who can we make a deal with. I don't think there's a bad site there. It's just a question of who can we make a deal with, so.
Who has that big empty lot where they just tore down that warehouse and everything?
That's City Gate, I believe, on Sierra Madre and
Yeah.
Cimarron. Griffith's Blessing owns that. One of the concerns would be that with these private developers, they've got a pretty high basis. They bought that land at the top of the market, and it's there's a holding cost, as you know, and they've had it for a while. Nothing's been happening. I'm not sure of the numbers, but it's expensive property, and how willing they are to deal, we don't know. Mike's had some discussions with them. The last meeting we had, Chris Jenkins was there. He sat in for an hour, and we asked him. He got up as he left and addressed us, and he said he really liked the energy and the grassroots nature of this group. We know that it would benefit his private pocket if something as substantial as this market would go in there. We know that it's going to help all the area, but how much he can wheel and deal, I don't know. Mike's been dealing. Maybe you can address that.
Well, and Bobby may be as good as myself on that as well, but Chris is open, totally open. How many acres does Jenkins own?
70 plus?
90-something, I think.
I've heard he has 90-some acres of downtown property.
He has the city auditorium block, he has this, he has some other property.
And so when you think at it from their perspective, what is 2 acres to them if it re-energizes downtown? Everything goes at that point. And so I think he's open. Chris has said he's open to anything. Tell me what you want. And I think we go to him with this report that we're going to put together and say, hey, how do you fit in? I mean, what do you want to do here? We'd like you to donate.
Yeah.
We'd like you to donate the Chrissy Fowler block.
One of the other advantages that Mike and Bobby both brought up is that if it was the Chrissy Fowler site, that's pretty much ready to go. It's like out of the box. The infrastructure is there, the plumbing, the storm, the gas, all the services are already there. You've got a building up. You'd have to have new services, new systems on the inside, but somebody mentioned that perhaps that could be open as early as 4 months.
Correct.
Something like that. So that's a
That'd be
huge
cool, have it
advantage.
by the summer.
Let me, there's one, as Darcy was leaving, and I really am late, but I gotta leave too, but Darcy was leaving and she was, wanted to point out the woman who showed up to downtown parking structure on Cascade, south of Platte. Aaron Briggs and Andrea had identified that one as a potential first floor, because that garage can go another 2 levels up. So you could take that first floor in a way, and it has a good storefront on it. It's a faux
Oh, on
storefront.
Cascade, right.
Yeah.
It was promised as a storefront garage, that was
Yep.
its original design. Could I just mention 2 things? I know we're a very ahistorical community, but there are deed restrictions on Dorchester Park, which some of us know about and would definitely bring forward. And Darcy also suggested the city auditorium. And in the 20s and the 30s, when I lived here last century, that was the place where there were tons of markets and flower markets and whatnot. And that's a public lot. I thought the city auditorium was still publicly owned. It is still.
It still is.
The city auditorium is, Jenkins doesn't have that yet.
No, he
So
has
it is
less
still
of it.
publicly owned, so. Although I think Christie Fowler is the best site, but the city auditorium is a possibility.
So are you saying that Dorchester would be out completely?
My understanding of deed restrictions in the
Um,
family is yes.
I don't know the answer to this, but it's, it's way too much detail, but it's more than one property. And it came to the city as more than one property, so some of it probably is restricted, and what those restrictions say would
It's the
have.
Dorr family, it's in the book on the history of the
Right.
parks of Colorado Springs, if anyone would like to look at it.
Is that also on, as, like the antlers would be the same?
We don't know.
No, the Atlas is totally different.
Most,
But then Darcy also brought up, she was in our group, but she should have been in the location group, brought up, next to Dorchester Park is like the old warehouse, which I guess used to be an ice rink. So,
Which is empty now.
yeah, so there is another, so just a big open building next to Dorchester Park.
That has a big parking lot as
Yeah.
well, up on the Las Vegas. So,
bingo parlor?
there was a bingo parlor, and I think a roller rink, actually. But, so there's more than just Chrissy Fowler. There are other sites available. And it's just a matter of zeroing in and who can you make a deal with? You know, the bottom line to me would be, what's it going to cost? Because convenience-wise, you know, we're not scattered. Downtown is still rather compact. It's still, there's walkability involved. And I think it's wide open to have a great public market here in Colorado Springs, especially with this group. Any other questions?
What did y'all come up with next steps? I forgot to ask this group too. And I think, Melissa, did you have this next steps?
It's not really, but I can come up with.
Yeah, if you can come up with some. Did y'all
I
have
don't
next
know, we
steps?
didn't address direct next